think what we sometimes forget as founders, as leaders, as CEOs, if our people and our team, if they're not growing at the pace that the business is growing at personally, like developing themselves, the business is going to leave them behind. I have found certain individuals, they would rather be the conductor of a smaller train, like a $20 million
Hmm.
train, than
Yep.
just a passenger on a $160 million train. Have you run into
Yeah.
that
I
yourself?
mean, it's a fact, really. People will grow with you and some will grow out from you. And they don't necessarily have those same aspirations. On this train going the speed that we're trying to go, you got to have those people that are really bought into it. And you will
Yep.
quickly find out who is and who isn't.
Welcome back to another episode of Do Business, Do Life. I've got Matt Dixon here with us today. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Pretty excited about it.
Man, you've got a lot going on in your life right now. So we were just talking before we hit record. Plan is for you to officially become a dad tomorrow.
Tomorrow is the day. Yeah. Which was actually one of my champagne moment goals for the year, which you can't really totally plan that, but it ended up working out. So
Well, now we just have to talk about it because everybody's like, well, what's he talking about? So we were just kind of going down memory lane here before we hit record. And even though like we're going to get into this, but looking at the numbers, you joined Triad November 23rd, 2022. As we record this, it's October 15th, 2024. So less than 2 years in. But looking back at your numbers, 2021, 23 million, 23.7 million of total assets, 2022, 47 million change, 2023, 81.8. As we sit here, you're pacing for 160 plus million of total assets this year. That's a double and then another double and then another double 3 years in a row. And, one of the things I've seen is I've seen like doubles when firms are smaller, but to see the double trajectory continue at the pace and at the volume you're at is almost unheard of. I don't honestly, I can't think of another example that I've seen in the industry, but it goes back to setting goals. And in our very first Triad experience that you came out, which was launch 2023, you set a champagne moment. I believe it was something to the effect of, I need to get a wife. You wrote it
yeah,
down. I don't remember exactly how you wrote it down. Do you remember
yeah,
exactly
find
how you wrote
find a
it down?
wife.
I need to find a wife.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a time in my life where I realized, hey, this I might as well make it a real goal, write it out. So I think at the time, what was I? I was 30, 34 maybe right then. Yeah, because I'm 36 now. So yeah, I would have turned 35 a couple months later. Yeah, so I was like, hey, big crossroads, got a lot of stuff going on with the business, but it's not the same if you don't have the queen at the top with you.
Mm.
So yeah, it ended up working out pretty well.
Yeah. And we're speaking of Riley, so hopefully
Yeah.
she's listening to this eventually. I know she's got other stuff on the agenda here coming up right around the corner. But you and Riley, it wasn't like you just went out and found a wife. You and Riley had known each other and kind of rekindled that relationship, got married. Now you're expecting a little girl tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the amount of business growth that you've experienced, but also personal growth in the last couple of years is unheard of. So looking back, if you were to talk to Matt when he was writing that down, that champagne moment, what would you tell yourself? Like just looking back where your business was, where your life was at that point, and where it's come so quickly in the last couple of years.
I'd definitely say like just continue to think big, um, and be visionary. So thinking about the possibilities of things that I don't fully get now or, aren't necessarily off the table. You just have to, create a bigger vision and believe that it's possible and then execute it, right? It's all about how you follow through with what your goals are anyways. And I know like a lot of what I will talk about even probably today is a lot of it is about goal setting and being clear with that vision and making sure that the rest of the team is clear with it. And so even thinking back like to then where I was with how many staff members I even had then, which is probably maybe about five.
Mm-hmm.
And we're up above, like 22, 23 employees now. A lot of that was just like I grew up around the industry. And so in the industry, it was kind of normal to have two or three or four or five employees, but you didn't see too many independent firms that had, 10, 15 employees. A lot of overhead, a lot of stress, single, producer type office structures usually. Um, but when I kind of started chatting with Triad with you guys and with some of the other great members here, I was like, well, hey, there's a different type of lifestyle that I could create, a different type of firm we could create. We could create something that grows organically, and then I get the team involved, and they focus on the growth and the goals, and it's less on me. And so I think looking back then, if I would have caught hold of this same idea sooner, what I would tell myself, way back then was, hey, think big and continue to set big goals and find the right people to help to facilitate those goals. What I like to call who, not how.
Mm. Well, one of the things that I've personally seen and witnessed is you have been a complete student of the game. And even if you look at where your production was before we met you, you were pacing for just under a $50 million year, as we were connecting up, which would put you easily top 1% of 1% in the independent financial advisor space. And unfortunately, what I've seen, and I'd love to get your take on this, sometimes in our business, when the production grows, so does the ego. And all of a sudden, the person that was a student in the early days, all of a sudden is kind of like develops this mentality of, I've kind of already got this all figured out. And one of the things I've seen in you, Matt, all the way through is just a constant humbleness. And yeah, you've got some things, and you've taught our members some incredible things, but you've maintained the student mentality. Is that just a way of thinking that you have? Like, how do you protect against the ego growing with the production?
Really just never arrived mindset is where, like, and it's a true thing, right? It's not just something I make up and answer a question that way. It's just like, to me, it's like, there's more in me and there's more in my team. And so if we're never arriving to this destination of like, we're on top of the mountain in a sense, then what ego do you have to be found there? But then also, I have to attribute a lot of stuff to you guys. But then also the members, like good friend, obviously, Anthony Pellegrino. I mean, the dude's a straight up student still. I mean, and he's pacing some killer numbers this year, right? And so kind of being in an environment and an atmosphere where there's other folks, SHP and Derek, and I talk to those guys all the time. They're always being students of small little things, where it's tweaks or they can make, or let me test this out, let me try that out. Anthony came out to our office at one time and just like, hey, let's see what you guys got going on here in this particular area, and we share, like he says a lot, and I love that he says this, but it's a true thing. Iron sharpens iron. Well, no, and like and it's true. It's like I've always kind of just pictured if there's other humble people around me, like Anthony or like Derek at SHP, and not just Derek or not just Anthony, but their firms alike, but then also the good folks where they haven't arrived and they're still also students of the game. But they've also showed a way where it can be done. Then to me, if it's possible, then it can be done. So I don't have any issues pursuing that, because I think the biggest thing that would ever set anybody back or hold anybody back is what happens if we fail, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a mindset thing where goals are built to be broken, but also goals are built to build, right? So if we come up short, and that's why even this year we set a much loftier goal than the original goal. Believe it or not, like 2 years ago when I originally had this idea of like, hey, let's do 75 million, I think was last year's like goal, and we hit that. And so then that was really just a building year to set up for this year was the actual goal. And we were trying to be a student of anything we could learn from Anthony, from SHP, from Triad, from whoever would participate in the PAC groups. Like we get on the calls, my staff's on the stuff, like all focus on the same goal, which this year was going to be 100 million. Mm. And after we hit 80 something million last year, I had a couple of staff members say, well, I think we actually need to raise that goal because we weren't doing this, we weren't doing this, we weren't doing this. And now this entire next year, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. Mm. So we might want to raise this goal a little bit. Was a little stressed about it, but here we are.
Well, so I want to unpack that real quick. You just I'll lead into this thought. Ryan Sparks on our team, who's one of the coaches, obviously you know him well. We talk a lot about the red line of burnout and the green line of significance. And you just you kind of touched all over it, which was, coming up in the business, you'd seen a lot of top producers where it was kind of all on them. It was their personality. It was their production, smaller team, which is hard. Building a big business that way is hard because it's all on your shoulders. Well, guess what? The green line is not an easy line. It's a different line. It's also a hard line. You have to be dedicated to it. You've been a true student, but now you're building it around a team and taking some of that weight off of your shoulders and, replacing it with some other weights and leadership and culture and things that come along with it. But you just nailed a piece of that. It's almost like you shifted what you were building. Like I was headed this way, and now I see a different framework and a different path. Maybe we'll put this graphic. I know our team did a little case study, but going back through your numbers, when you did 23.7 million in 2021, 71% of that was Matt with a couple of other advisors on the team. 2022 was 47 million and change. 62% of that was you with still two other advisors. 81.8 last year, you doubled the advisor team to 4, and now it was about 50-50 was your production versus their production. This year, another double, 160 mil, and you think you had obviously a quick start to the year, but you think you'll end up being between 20 and 30% of the total year's production.
Right.
Did I get all that right?
That's right. And I have to also pay credit in there too, where it's like that 56 million jump to the 81 million jump, or 47 million, we're right in some change up to 81. That was when we joined Triad specifically, right? And then our production increase and the amount that I had to do out of pocket, as far as my time spent, went down, right? And then again, this year it went down. It's because there is a model and there's a possibility, right? And that's what I was trying to say a minute ago is a lot of the mindset, if you're a true student, is to understand that if somebody else has done it, then it can be done. And I think there's a part of this industry that is an old dinosaur type strategy where one guy does the whole thing. But I mean, there's a lot of great people I think that could have a better lifestyle. And that's why I think Triad exists. And I think that's why you always exist, is there's always advisors that are open to hearing about how to be students and to grow it a different way.
Yeah. Well, I've shared this before. Selfishly for Sean and I, we had an incredible run in this business. Just like you grew up in this business, we grew up in this business, different model. But selfishly, we didn't want to build a business that became our lives. We wanted to build a business that blessed our life and blessed our team members' lives. And I think that's the other benefit.
Yeah.
And so now you're growing a bigger business that serves more clients, but it also serves more of your employees and team members. And so you're actually creating more opportunities in Greenville, North Carolina, or South Carolina, sorry, and where you've got your other offices. So not only are you serving more clients, you're also serving more team members as you grow a bigger business within your local area. So it's pretty amazing when you can kind of step out and empower others and create those career tracks. What's been the most rewarding thing seeing that kind of play out over the last 2 years for you?
Oh no, that definitely kind of brings up a couple of thoughts, even because why you were saying that in reality is like significance to me is actually the focus of other people. Like to be significant, it's what your cause is about, is really should be most likely always focused on impact that you have on other people, because there's a lot of successful people, but truly living in significance is blessing the lives of others. And there's staff members on my team, that some of their goals that we do with them, the same thing that you guys do with us at launch is what's the yearly goals, the champagne moment goals. Like we do that same stuff with our staff, bleeds right through. And we've had a couple of them, not think that they would be able to buy, their first home, especially in an interest rate environment that we're in right now. But for them to be able to hit that champagne goal, it's a tremendous experience for them. But then also that's a tremendous experience for me, for the business owner, the founder, to be able to see other people have their own lives impacted that way. It's tremendous, right? So
Yeah.
I have another, a couple of advisors that if you would have asked them what they would be doing, a couple of years ago, I mean, their lives are completely changed now too. And so that's where I step out, they have to step in and step up, right? And that's I have my one top advisor now, like he's a whole different human being. And I don't know that he even knew he was capable of that prior to, to working with us and getting the opportunity.
Yeah.
But he's had great leadership around him outside of me. I have to attribute again a lot of that back to Triad and what you guys have done for us. So, I mean, him and his wife are building a home this year.
Are you speaking about Byron?
Byron, yeah.
Okay.
Dude's
He's
a killer.
one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
He's what I call the silent assassin because he slow plays everybody. He's just real nice, kind of naive. What I mean by slow play is just kind of like he's unassuming. So you never assume like this guy is the assassin that's killing it. So, and he's crushing it well right now for us. And he loves the Triad culture and the other firms that we get to interact with. And he's a student also. And I think the one thing about him that is kind of, iron sharpens iron. I preach it a lot to them is that they've never arrived. And they believe that too. So he's a student. I mean, he was just crafting and recrafting our sales process again just here in the last couple months because he's now seeing a much larger case size than he's ever used to seeing. And he got to this point where he was hitting a bit of a ceiling, you could say, and his confidence started to wane. And I gotta, when you step back, you can't just step out, right? You gotta stay in.
Yes.
But you can step back, right? And the one good counsel and coaching I got from Nick, got from Ryan even specifically on making sure, hey, as you kind of hand these reins over, don't disappear, obviously. And they didn't think that that's what I would do, but what they're meaning is like, hey, stay engaged and continue to coach because there's going to be areas where he may hit that ceiling and you just need to be there to make sure you guys work through that thing. You had to work through it at one point, so you got to make sure he's prepared to work through it, right?
Yeah.
So just even 3 weeks ago, we got on a call with Ryan and Jordan and basically just Nick got on there as well, knocked through it, like went through our first appointment process again. He's a student of the game, so he's literally the next day he's back in the lab is what we call it, and he's kind of took a ton of notes together. He and I went through our first appointment like questionnaire part, or what are the questions that we're asking them? Are we going deep enough? And that's the one thing we got out of it is some folks don't feel as affected when the market's up or down or when interest rates are higher or, during a political season and they're maybe not as stressed. And sometimes those folks have quite a bit of money. So how do you still draw out the value add? And you got to do that with the right questions, right? So he was just in there retooling, I kid you not, the other day and already has the other advisors now presenting it the exact same way. Confidence is back up. He just closed like a $4.5 million case, on Friday. So, I mean, we're surrounded with some good folks. So I can't take any of the credit really, but we're grateful to be able to build the kingdom wherever we can.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Well, I want to dive into one of those lessons there that you just hit. It's, when you're so busy working in the business, the whirlwind of appointment, oftentimes what you're craving and wishing you had time to do is step back and work on the business, but you're so busy in the business on the hamster wheel, you can't get off. And I love that you transition the thinking of, okay, now I have time. Now I can start to work on the business. And the best analogy I have is you went from being a player, playing in the game every single day, to stepping out as a coach. But guess what? Your team still needs a coach. They can't just be running the playbook on their own. And because I've seen, I had this happen in my own business. I can specifically think of a time where Sean and I were on a beach and we were kind of like, honestly, kind of complaining. We were like, man, our team just doesn't get it. We, in our job, we were recruiting. So we were cold calling guys like yourself, and our team was really struggling with that in this moment. And then at the end of the day, you were there to hear Jocko speak. That mirror he talks about where you look in the mirror and it says problem identified. We had that realization. Like who hired them? Who trained them? Us. So at the end of the day, whose fault is it if they're not trained up? It's our fault. And that's where we started really leaning in and coaching a couple times a week specifically to solve for that need. And I love the fact that you're already getting ahead of that. It's not like, oh, shoot, I got to jump back in. It's like, no, this is the new game I'm playing. I'm more of a coach now than a player. What other realizations have you had as you've started to see a shift in just how you're building a business from how you were building it before?
I think just I've always believed there's like the most valuable asset you have are human capital, right? Everybody talks about that. But the true value of it is like to when you really realize there's so much more capable of accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish if you'll help them buy into the process by owning some of that process and being there in the building phase of that process. So sometimes it is a little bit more of like you got to go through the why and explain it out a little bit more than maybe as a founder like you would want to. But that's one thing I've had to kind of really dig into is there's a lot of great people and a lot of great skill that they have and great experience. And sometimes it's about cultivating that experience and making sure that they're part of the building and then trusting that what you built, right, can be done by somebody else. And I think my brothers are in the industry, like they run an exact same shop I run, just in a different market. And if there was like real counsel and coaching, I wish that they would latch on to in reality. And we have these conversations all the time. It's just define the process in such a way that they can kind of peel back some of their time that they're spending in appointments. And if I would say that about them, I'd say it about anybody that has that desire, which you just have to find the right people that you can trust and that your process is right and just believe that they're capable of definitely solving it just the same as you would, but maybe it's not always 100%, right? And there's room for that, but that's also why you still got to be in there. Like you were just talking about, you got to still be in there coaching. It's not like you can just pop out and not have to be involved anymore. So I think the value of like really the human capital and the possibility that they have is to be successful as well is super vital.
You also, as I was preparing for this conversation, Matt, I told you in the moment, but this was last year's launch, which for us, that's we do a January experience every year. It's celebrating some of the big wins from the community, our members like yourself. We've got some very specific awards based on just habits we want to, reward and hopefully duplicate within the community. And you won our Do Business, Do Life Award, which is the most prestigious award that Triad gives each year. And it's really built on, or it's really designed to reward building a business that's bigger than yourself. And also making sure, like on the flip side, you're living life on your terms. And obviously we already talked about how last year was such a big year, hitting the champagne moment, getting married, now kiddo on the way. And one of the things though, that was the most meaningful one of the most meaningful moments I personally have had at Triad since we've existed. You were on a panel with the other Do Business, Do Life Award nominees. And when you started speaking about the breakthroughs you'd seen with your team, how you'd added to the team, how you'd empowered the team, how you'd really worked on your culture, you teared up, man. And you were a pretty well put together guy. Like sometimes, like honestly, a little bit intimidating because you're good looking, young, driven, great producer. And I remember I came up to you right after you got off stage and you go, "Hey, my bad. I didn't mean to break down." I was like, "No, dude, like that's awesome. That was from the heart. I promise everybody in this room connected on a deeper level with you because you showed your true authentic self. And honestly, it showed how much you cared about the team and what you were building." And so I wanted to make sure we captured that in this conversation because back to building a completely different business that isn't just Matt and his personal production, how has that played out on the reward side of just like seeing team members like accomplish things, and like how has that impacted you on a deeper level than when it was just more of a solo player game versus a multiplayer game?
I think really like when we got with Triad, like one of the resounding like ideas was how do you go from the success line to the significant line? And I've kind of mentioned it previously, but like to really expound upon it is like significance to me over just the last 2 years, I've kind of realized is like, hey, it's all about how everyone around you is affected by what you're trying to accomplish. And I think Triad more than anything like that. You guys preach that, but you breathe that, you speak that, like you see that in your culture. And that's the type of culture that I mean, to me, it's everyone should have that same idea, right? Is to realize that so much out there is much greater than us to explain away even. And so we got to attribute that to God or whatever people do follow and worship. And truly purpose on earth to me is to allow other people to have significant lives as well. So it's so impactful. And I think for the last 2 years, what I didn't realize until probably about 6 months ago is really the type of business that I was building, where I kind of forever just kind of knew, hey, I want to build something where I can give back to people, give back to God, give back to the kingdom, as I call it a lot of times. And in reality, what kind of just hit me about 6 months ago is like, that is significant, that, where you focus on other people, that's to me the definition of where significant lies, is like in the effect and the change of other people's lives. And what we get to do every day is financially plan for people. And sometimes that looks a little more antiquated than saying that we're building other people's lives. But, the people around us are affected in such a fantastic way that I have to, I have to say that it's changed my life, no doubt. And what you said to me after that particular panel even like still sticks with me today, to make sure that I stay and remain authentic self and vulnerable whenever I need to be vulnerable, because, it's important that people connect with authenticity, right? And making sure that people get it when you're trying to connect with them and you're a bit more vulnerable, right? So to me, who comes across a bit stoic, as I already know, it can work me pretty good, just talking about how grateful I am for my team and how grateful I am for their own individual growth, for sure.
Well, I think that's a great lesson in leadership. And from my experience, most guys struggle with it a lot more than the ladies do. But I will tell you, I've had my team. I can think of, it was a couple of years into Triad, and the team, it was right around our end of year planning meeting, gave both Sean and myself. It was pictures of the very first conference room when we first moved in.
Oh, wow.
Of our office, which was just like a dump compared to what it looks like today. And so those kind of emotions came flooding back, and I just broke down right in that moment. And I remember team members coming up and just saying, like, I appreciate how real you are. And I think sometimes us guys see that as weakness, where in reality, true, authentic emotions in the moment. I'm not saying you should roll around the office crying every day either,
right?
But true, authentic, real emotions, that's what bonds humans to each other. And so I think as leaders, that's, you should be okay with going there every once in a while. So that's, it really did, Matt. Like in that moment, I immediately felt like I knew you on a deeper level and I respected you on a deeper level because like you were real. And I think we can't ever forget that.
Yeah, no, really. And I did take what you had said right after, like, to heart, because now I don't get emotional as much, I think, with my staff about it all, but like I do pour in a bit more time and energy to my team about like really what I see for them, what I see for the firm, like kind of spend that time connecting so that they get a bit more of the authentic me, not just the, he shows up, he's here, sometimes he's just tucked away in his office because he's cranking out whatever he's cranking out. Or when he just only comes into advisor solutions meeting and he basically takes over the meeting and says, hey, what are you doing this? Why are you ending your meeting at 45 minutes? Why aren't you going 55 minutes? Like, why are you, telling me I should be doing this way differently? So when you have that time to kind of like pour back in, I think that's the one thing that I've done since I even had that launch experience where you did come back up to me and say that, like, I've spent time this year kind of connecting, you can say, on a little bit deeper level with my team. Yeah. And we've actually changed our culture entirely. And I have to, again, give credit to you guys for that. We're like the culture time that we put in with the brand manifesto, and some of the things that we are striving to. And it doesn't happen overnight, but no, we've just had to get the right people and put the time in on them.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. There is no quick fix. Like people, this is one of the things, like as we're approaching 100 team members now, just under 4 years in. Guess what? People, like as you said earlier, human capital. It's one of the most powerful forms of leverage in growing a business. and also people come with emotions. And if
Yeah.
you think if you double, as you have, your number of team members, that doesn't also double some of the, let's call it personnel things that pop up, you're kidding yourself if you don't think that some of that's going to come along with it. But I do think the antidote for that, to your point, is building a super strong culture that I've got, like here for those watching on camera, if you can hear on audio, I'm flipping through it. You spent the time to do the work where you laid out a vision for where we're headed as a company,
Yeah.
where you talked about here is the business we intentionally want to build as a team, not by accident. Let's just see where we end up.
That never happened
And
by accident.
you like manifested a pieces of it, right? You didn't say, here's how we're going to get there. You just said, here's where we're going. That's a vision. So like looking back, this was about 2 years ago, you did this. What's cool is you had a 3-year plan to do 150 million. I was joking. I was like, dude, we're going to have to update this because you already blew through the 150. But what are learnings from a leadership standpoint? Because I think a lot of people hear vision and it's like this fluffy, like, oh yeah, that's just some business book. Like, how's it actually played out for you?
So, I mean, really, I had to really take a step back from the total business idea when I was originally building the mission control brand manifesto. Had a call with Ryan, who's excellent. He's also an 8, so I think he shares some of these ideas and visionary ideas.
Enneagram 8 for those that aren't
Enneagram 8,
familiar.
yeah.
Yep.
So he and I, like, we connect pretty well in certain areas, and he's a big thinker, big dreamer, and he supports me in that area, but he also is good about like drawing that out, like encouraging you to think bigger. And I would say just a lot of that real intentional work has to be done, but I had to step back and look at my business and break it down. And I think I've maybe heard you guys talk about this once before, and I'm not too sure where I learned it, but just basically kind of breaking down your business in a before, during, and after process.
Yeah.
Right. And if the goal is client acquisition, client retention, then there's a before, during, and after of bringing on that client and retaining that client. But then you have to then think, okay, culturally, what processes need to be in place? Who are the people that I want to run these processes? And who's going to be in the leadership of making sure that these people, as we grow, they grow with us, so they grow out from us. And that's okay too, right? And that's a part for me. I think if I had to really go back to where I was before, is because I'm an 8, I take a couple whenever I have an employee that can't be with me anymore, right? And we've maybe outgrown them or they've outgrown us in some capacity and they need to be into greener pasture somewhere else. Like, I actually personally have had to deal with the loss of an employee in a way where, to me, it actually hurts. And there was at one point, like even in the last year, where I had to kind of cancel a couple of situations. And for about 2 or 3 weeks, like I was almost in a slight like slumber of things. Like, it was because I take ownership for that. Just like what Jocko says is like, hey, you didn't train them right. If you didn't, coach them right, if you didn't put them in the right situations, right? Like, I took a lot of ownership on that. And it took me a couple of weeks to kind of get over this, to where I was almost found talking about it a little bit too much, which meant like, hey, yeah, it hurt. And so the great part about what comes after, though, is if you're building the right business for the right reasons, the people will be there, and you have to trust that process, and you have to understand that the culture sometimes will evolve on its own, and sometimes people stick around and they want to be a part of that, and sometimes they can't, and not because they weren't true and honest and authentic at the beginning, but when you go from 4 employees to 22, there's new leadership, that's brought in outside or hired from within. Some people, are going to serve in their capacity that they're going to serve, and we try to get the most out of them. But, telling a younger self, and it's something I have to remind myself of now is like, hey, don't be offended by that. Like, do the best that you can to love your employees and put them in the right positions, but you can't be hurt just because you've had to outgrow them in a way. And who we've literally got in since, believe it or not, like when I finally was able to get past these 2 particular employees we had to cancel and some of the culture that they weren't fitting, my entire mind opened up, believe it or not, to how we needed to be running that department differently, even like down to the point where when we even hired 2 replacements, like we have set them up in a different way. because now we have the right people with the right expectation. And we've actually created a whole new vision for that part of the company even. So like it literally, and a lot of times, again, I attribute this back to God, because faith is also the absence of things that haven't happened, right? So it's like it's not tangible. It's the evidence of things not seen. So it's like you have to kind of walk into this thing not knowing like, well, these are two most important person on my entire marketing team. And they got into a bit of a culture spat, and clearly it was affecting other people on the team. And so I tried to resolve it, didn't resolve, had to cancel them. And that was a big deal, because that's also a part of where the engine gets started, right, with the marketing side. So, but I promise that like it opened up my entire idea of like how we could be running that part of the business differently just by walking in a little bit into the dark there.
Well, those are such wise words that many advisors double your age still haven't figured out. And I can speak from complete experience. Michael Hyatt, who I know you've had the opportunity to do some coaching with at Triad, he would always ask a question, and I got this question asked to me when I would, it was a session where I was coaching with him. What does this make possible? Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when you're faced with adversity in business, your brain automatically goes to, oh, this whole thing's blowing up, and we go to kind of the scarcity mindset. And one of the things, to your point, I love hearing from you, Matt, almost this extreme ownership, Jocko style of, I think his saying is, there are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders. Yeah. So you taking the responsibility and saying, it seems like maybe the season, we tried to work through this with a couple team members, but maybe their season here is over. And that's tough. Like from a personal standpoint, you, a guy that I know loves people, regardless of whether they work at your company or not, it's almost like you take on this different responsibility as a leader within the company. And I have found that to be very true, is if you say, this is where our culture is up and to the right, and where we want to, what we stand for, essentially, actually what it means is oftentimes you'll have slightly higher turnover, because a lot of other businesses will just put up with it and let the water cooler talk and the cancer go around the office, where if you don't stand for it, and you stand for your team members that are bought into that vision, it means it's your job to get the ones that aren't off the bus. And which doesn't make it any easier. But over time, if you constantly kind of prune those that maybe you've outgrown, or maybe they've outgrown you, to your point, you can stay true to a team that's focused on a singular vision, which is what you've laid out as the founder. And so I've just seen that play out internally with us. Sean and I have gone through some really tough seasons, friends that are no longer here. And I just feel like as a leader, as you step into that, it's kind of part of what you sign up for lack of a better term. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I hear you expressing.
100%. Yeah. And I think when you're 4 employees deep, like loyalty's thick, you're the small crew. And as you grow, it's like those people can stay with you if they're willing to get on the same train. Like you've gotten off one train, not that train was headed to a place that wasn't fantastic, but you've caught hold of another opportunity and another possibility you didn't know was possible. And so you had to get off that train and get onto this new train. And do they get off the old train and get onto the new train with you, headed in a little bit different direction, and possibly a higher, faster speed, right, of trajectory. And so that's how it is important that, like, when we go about this brand manifesto and getting into the mission control, it's like it has to be done intentionally, because you're going to get into these spots 6 months later if you're truly on this fast train, and you're going to have all these same issues that all the rest of us have already had, that people before me had. Yeah. So being all in, and that's why, like, there's a joke at one point that went around where I said at the beginning, like when I first came out to launch, it was like, hey, I don't know if this is a FMO or a cult, but either way, I'm about it, right? Yeah, I'm in. And it's such a real thing, but it's like, because there's other folks like what I'm talking about here, that they've dealt with the growth and the growth pains, but the ones that survive are the ones that are all in, and they themselves bought into the vision of Triad and what you guys are trying to promote, and basically trying to show people how to grow in such a way. So you have to be intentional. In my mind, is like, that's the only way you can get through the bumps that will come along. And there's some other great members that I even just spoke here at the summer thing, right? Where it's like, it's so cool to see other people kind of growing, a couple humble guys that are like talking about, hey, I don't even know how many employees we have now. I don't even know who really handles most of that. Like that's great because they know they're at this place where somebody's handling it. Otherwise they wouldn't continue to do business. So I love seeing when that kind of stuff happens. They're going to be in the same spot where I was at about 12 employees, 13 employees, where things really start to get difficult, right? Where it all kind of rolls up to Matt. And that's where like the best leadership happened for me when I got into that spot and I leaned on Triad, right? I leaned on your team. I leaned on my coaches.
Didn't Kinsey came out to see you
Kinsey
guys?
flew out. We had a culture reset. Made sure like leadership was in the right spots, doing the right things, making sure the culture was preached. Leaned on the team big time. Had a great experience with Kinsey. So for anybody that doesn't understand what she does, like, heck, you're missing out. So hop on a Zoom call with that lady. I mean, totally helped my team. And even here today, it was like, we were just talking about it earlier. It's like, hey, we might need to go through the anagram side again because we have new employees. So it was like that impactful that even my teams, I mean, we still talk about it. So,
well, for those that, because we've mentioned it a few times, did a podcast with Ian Cron, who's kind of been the godfather for the Enneagram at Triad and for a lot of our members. So we'll link to that in the show notes if you want to dive in a little deeper there. Matt, I want to circle back. You said something, and I just want to get your take on it. As we go through your numbers, a double from 20 to 45, 50-ish, a double again to 80-ish, a double again this year to 160-ish. If we go back, the business, how it looked at 20 mil of assets in a year to the business today, how it's evolved to 160 mil. Obviously, the business is probably not even recognizable if you looked at like a before and after snapshot. And I think what we sometimes forget as founders, as leaders, as CEOs, if our people and our team, if they're not growing at the pace that the business is growing at, personally, like developing themselves, the business is going to leave them behind. And one of the things you mentioned is like get everybody on the same bus or on the same train. I have found certain individuals, they would rather be the conductor of a smaller train, like a $20 million train, than just a passenger on a $160 million train. Have you run into that yourself? Like where the business is kind of outgrown? I mean, I'm not trying to throw the team members that aren't with you under the bus, but I've just found that to be a bit of a reality. Have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact, really. I mean, the reality is that everybody will have the fact come and hit them in the face one day if they continue to grow, which is people will grow with you and some will grow out from you, and they don't necessarily have those same aspirations. And personally, I sometimes will take that personal because I truly do invest a lot of what I call like just emotional equity into my team, and I want them to be successful, and not just in this part of their life, but I believe that if they're enjoying what they're doing here, they're enjoying what they're building here. When they go home, they're building things at home with the right mindset, and they're learning things here that they can go apply at home. And I believe that that's true 100%. So for them to then come back and tell me like they have the opportunity to buy a new home this year, like that's building what they're building here is now translating to building what they're building there. And there will be people, and I've definitely experienced it where, and I just had, again, not to notably just throw people under the bus that have worked with us. I don't name anybody, obviously, but in reality, it's like there's been one specific one where it's like she would rather be the conductor of a 6-passenger train, okay, and that's it, and that's all she needed to have. It's a coal burning train, so it's one of those slow ones. It's not the high speed, high fast train that they have out in
not the ones
Italy.
in Japan.
Right. In Japan where they're flying around. So she would rather be on that train, and that's fine. And even though, and here's the hardest part for me, it's like I went over this with my director of ops, like I'm telling you like 3 or 4 times, because I'm like, listen, skills, 10, like knowledge of the industry, 10, culture fit to the company now that we're at 22 employees, 3. Tried to what I call medicate, do some holistic medicine where we try to nurse her back to outside that 5 box on a culture fit.
Yep.
And, we put her in what I called the the rehabilitation program there 2 or 3 times. And
Yep.
the reality is I probably, when I thought about it the first time, should
Yep.
have should have done it, went and did it, went and
Yep.
just had that nice parting way conversation. Hey, I told you at the beginning, your stay here would be important to you, the same it's important to us. And you've built a phenomenal resume working with us. And that's the exact conversation we had with her on the way out. I should have already had that conversation, shouldn't have went as long as it did. But
Yeah.
I told her, use this as a reference in reality. But she built a nice resume working for an independent firm, got some additional skills, got another license while she was here. Um, and I wish her the best at other places. But
Yeah.
on this train going the speed that we're trying to go, you got to have those people that are really bought into it. And you will
Yep.
quickly find out who is and who isn't.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting timing for this conversation. I was just working on this week's podcast newsletter, and one of the YouTube videos I stumbled across was Simon Sinek, and he was referencing, we've already talked about Jocko. He was talking about the Navy SEALs, how they are one of the top, like if you just look at them as a team, one of the top performing teams in the world. And what he talked about was the SEALs that made it and the SEALs that didn't. And back to that matrix you're kind of talking about, if it was a 2x2 matrix, you've got skill set on the vertical,
Mm-hmm.
you've got culture fit, the way SEALs call it, they call it trust. Obviously, when you're dealing with your life, that's really important. And they said the most dangerous SEALs were the 10 skill sets and the 1, 2, 3 trusts.
Wow.
Because you want to get them to be a fit because you're like, they've got all of the skill set, but yet they can't be on the team. And so what it creates is this I team versus this we team. And it's crazy. Like the Navy SEALs have figured it out. What you're explaining is the same thing plays out in business. I've experienced the same thing. Some of the hardest team members to transition out at Triad have been those high skill set, low culture fit.
Yeah.
It's
vital for growth.
Yeah.
Because
I'm curious. So on the team, once again, not naming any names, but if we just look at trends, when you've exited the high skill set, low culture fit sort of team members, what has the team said afterwards?
It's always been a lot clearer after the team speaks up about it, right?
Yeah.
It makes what you did absolutely a confirmation, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you didn't look for the team to come out and speak about it, but I have this particular individual I was just referencing, even like I've had 2 or 3 specific team members come in and say like, listen, I'm just glad that what's happened. Not that we wanted her to be gone, but in reality, it's like, if she can't see the opportunity that she has here, like we don't want that person to be here trying to build this.
Yeah.
Right. And they take ownership in it. If you have the right people, that's how I've just seen it now. Is like, if I have the right people on the bus, how do you know?
Yeah.
Well, they treat it like it's theirs, and they come and they have these frank conversations. Like I've had a couple of times where like, hey, she didn't want to build it with us. That's okay. Right. We didn't necessarily want to be building it with her because she didn't see the same opportunity. I had literally on Friday had a team member that was literally her left hand team member, and he brought it up to me. And this has been a few months now. And
Yeah.
he brought it up to me on Friday to say, hey, I'm grateful for what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes we got to be a little patient about it, but we're better off. And he's referencing this entire conversation in the form of, hey, us and we, like what we're building here.
Yeah.
And that to me is, again, not that I intentionally even sought out to do this way, but over time, what I've just found is there are some small like nuggets of, when you got something, then people start referring to it like it's theirs. And that's when you got the right people. And I've just had to figure that out by happenstance, right? Where it's like I've got myself in some of these scenarios where then my team steps up and talks about it. So I believe now I have, at least for now, for sure, everybody on the bus that we truly believe is an awesome fit. And until the next level.
I there you go. It's kind of, as an entrepreneur, one of the things I've just embraced more and more is you've signed up for it's like a video game that never ends, right? It's Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. There's not an end. There's not a scoreboard where the time is over. Your goal is to stay in business and continue to evolve and grow and serve. And just when you think you've got it figured out, there will be a curveball at that next growth level at that, I've heard companies break at 15 team members, 75, 150. So kind of that next inflection point of complexity. But this has turned into such a culture, leadership, team building podcast. And I think if you're an advisor out there listening in, this is the stuff from my experience that separates kind of those solo advisors that crush and build kind of a solo player business to what I would call the true businesses, the true kind of CEO levels where you're building a business that's bigger than you. Because if you can't figure out how to lead a team in the same direction, it's always going to be back on your shoulders at the end of the day. So I love that we've gone here with this, Matt. I'm guessing there are probably some advisors out there listening in. They're like, dude, we haven't got to any marketing. Like, how did he go from a double again? So on the marketing front, have there been any big inflection points that have been different from when you joined us to now that have led to some of the breakthrough growth?
I think just my vision of what needed to be done to kind of hit our goals, right? And it's the most magnificent thing about our industry is like, and there's a lot of industries this is true. And like in college, I worked in sales, so it's like you back into your goals, right? But like it really, truly in our business, like if you're paying attention to some stuff and you're tracking some stuff properly, like you can literally put $1 in the machine and get back $4, right? Mm-hmm. You put in 50 cents, put in a quarter, get back, $1.25, whatever it may be, whatever analogy you want to use. But in reality, it's like we can back into this thing. And so for me, when I set these goals, and I have to obviously look at my market and the size that we are, and we're not in Orlando, Florida, where my brothers are, between Orlando and Tampa, right? We're not in Chicago, where there's three or four firms up there that I know good guys are. We're in a smaller market. So to us, like every little detail is important. So I had a real hard time, I think, initially looking at what we were already spending and then our efficiency. So back in college, I had a pretty fortunate opportunity to work for this sales company where I shorthandedly got promoted into this position I wasn't planning on, and was almost in like this general manager role because half the dang division just straight up quit one summer. And here I am, like the only one that seems like he's having any sort of success, and I don't even know what I'm doing over here. But what I figured out pretty quickly is why I continued to maintain when everybody else was willing to kind of dip out is because I was just being a bit more efficient with my time, my energy, and I was looking at enough small details to say, okay, how can we increase my stick rate or my show rate, from 60% to 70%, which, believe it or not, from last year to this year, all we've changed or tweaked in marketing, one has been an experiment with TV, which in our market, very difficult. I'll just say it exactly how it is, stinking difficult. But really, we kept a lot of the other funnel straight up, seminars, workshops, et cetera, like experiences there. We've kept that funnel pretty much the same. What we focused on this year was how do we improve each fall off point? How do we increase the stick rate to the dinner seminar that we're putting on, where we're paying, we're sending out 10,000, 500 mail pieces or whatever it is people are sending out. Like, how do we get more people to show up to that? And then at the experience there, I sat down with my marketing team. And this is when I realized the first time I had to let one or two people potentially go on my marketing team is they weren't bought into creating a better experience there. It was autopilot, which meant if the owner and the founder is saying, we have not yet arrived, and you have members on your team that are saying, well, we've arrived, well, then who's the culture issue? It's obviously not the founder. So I had to look at pretty hard detail of like, hey, skill wise, again, 7, 8, 9 even. Yeah. But culture fit about to be phased out. And we went through each part of our funnel, you could say. And I sat down in a good, straight, frank conversation with Nick, and I had Nick come out here and watch our seminar. I've had him out here twice now, just because like the first time did a couple things. I got to improve that. Got on a couple calls with him afterwards, had him come out a second time to improve even my seminar game. But the one thing he kind of stopped me one day, he's like, listen, let me do some math for you. And he literally just breaks it out. He says, hey, let's just look at these small little areas where if you just increase your stick rate to the office, stick rate, from the appointments that you book to the office and from the first to the second, like let's break down your funnel. So honestly, that's where there is no flashy object here. This is all about like trusting the process, trusting your team, and being all in with when the coaches want to hop on that call. Don't be missing those calls. Hop on the call and like literally spend that time. Um, it's profoundly changed my entire life. I mean, we're not just talking about my business. We're talking about my life because that's what we do here is business and life. And then literally it's just
Amen.
pouring in, just pouring in.
Well, I want to make sure we get to this because you're kind of touching all over it. And I got some potential questions from the crew here, Ryan, Nick, Jordan. One of the things Jordan mentioned was seeing you transition from selling a product to selling a plan. And I believe what you call it is your true retirement plan at the firm. Yep. How has that changed the game for you? Because I know you grew up like in probably one of the best product sales firms I'd ever seen. A lot of it was life insurance back in the early days. Obviously, it's transitioned to wealth management, annuities, life, more of a holistic approach. But what's changed, like if you look back when you were kind of positioning and selling product versus selling a true plan that's really molded to them, how's that changed the game for you?
Oh, it's 100% of a game changer. When we went from the 47 million to 81 million, what we added in that particular year was our planning process to be very, very concrete, very clear, very driven, the same, replicatable, so that my other advisors could sit in there and sit with somebody that maybe has less assets, but they can walk through the same process, especially as they got more experience under their belt. If they don't change their process too much from somebody that maybe has 250,000 to 750,000, right? The only thing that changed was their case size. If they're still driving that process the exact same way, they're not having to do anything different except show up and sit down with the client that might just have a little bit more money. Now, when you get into some upper echelon, assets, maybe you start having to pivot your process a bit more. But really, for us, it was a total game changer because then everything was concrete. We talked about planning, focus. We put them on what we call the true retirement journey, which is our planning process. And in the end, what they get is the true retirement plan. What is something that's not limited, where they're maybe currently at. It's not necessarily that we're great guys and their current guys aren't great guys. Their great guys are just limited what they can provide. And what we're not is we're not limited in that capacity. We want a full service, comprehensive plan built for them because that's what we believe that they've earned, right? They've earned that. Especially we're talking about a generation that truly has been the backbone of our entire country. And I know people say it a lot, hear it a lot, but in reality, it's true. Like these folks, like they put in work for years. So they earned, and they'll tell you flat out, if you use the word deserve, they don't like that word. So like they've earned what we believe is the opportunity to have a full comprehensive plan. So it's been the total game changer. Jordan put in a ton of work for us. Kudos to that guy. Love him too. Just he's true and authentic as can be. He's helped us a ton, working with SHP and their process, working with Goldstone and their process. Again, we didn't try to recreate the wheel. We just went to where the wheel was already functioning perfect and then just adopted it to our planning process here.
Yeah. You touched on one thing that I think is really important because I'm sure at the beginning of this conversation, when we threw out those crazy growth numbers, a lot of advisors from my experience, if they're listening to this, their brain kind of clicked off. They're like, oh,
yeah, don't do that.
Matt's some special unicorn out there in the financial advisor universe. And really what you're unpacking right now, it's almost to me, it's like, here's the rainbow and here's the pot of gold at the end. All you did was packaged it for those retirees that earned it, to use your words. And now you just clarified the messaging of it's almost, I know Jordan's a big fan of Donald Miller and Story Brand. It's like, I'm the guide that's going to walk you on this retirement journey. to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, which is called your true retirement plan, which is your version of a holistic financial plan built on a CFP standard. But what's different than what I've seen in a lot of firms, the curse of knowledge gets in the way to where
Mhm.
you're trying to sound smart, kind of talking way over an average retiree's head and not breaking it down into messaging and clarifying the 3 steps in the journey to get them
Yep.
from afraid to retire to confident in retirement. And all you did was put in the work to clearly message that and kind of hold their hand as you walk them through it, which I'm guessing then led to you being able to step out of the way and train other advisors to follow the exact same process. So it's not
Exact
always
same
on you.
message. Yep.
I mean, is that it?
That's literally it. And when we really dumb it down like that, it is actually that simple. Um, and like you said, I agree with you. Like it'd be easy just to tune out and say, oh, well, this guy, he must just be some different type of guy. No, like in reality, just trusted, believed, bought in, was all in. And I think that there's one thing that I'll always like toot my own horn, which is not ever hardly often at all, but I will really say it's like when I'm about something, I'm about it. So I'm all in on it. And that's why I said it like, and it was a joke, but I was being so serious at the same time. Like it's, to me, it's still laughable because I didn't expect anybody else to hear what I had said. But when I called it a cold, I was like, hey, either way, I'm in. It's like I was being so serious. So
I
to me,
know.
it's like it is this simple though, where you break down that process, but you have to do the work kind of preemptively, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to go in doing this brand manifesto piece that you're defining out like who you are as a company, what you're there to do, who you are to there, to provide for. And then you slip all that messaging in, especially great things from Chris Smith, phenomenal guy. Love that guy. I mean, just the wordsmithing is what I call that, is like, just get that language into that process and it will literally do its own driving. It'll drive itself. And my guys now, like that's just what they're geared up to do. And what has helped them do at even younger ages. And I mean, my oldest advisor here legitimately is like 28. So he might be 29 now, but in reality, what I'm saying is like they're able to show up confidently themselves that this isn't something they had to figure out how to replicate from me, right? The process is all they had to figure out how to follow. And we've had excellent coaches and teachers on it.
You nailed another thing. When you take the time to message the vision, which is work, like I'm not going to downplay it. You put work in. Now we try to make it as easy as possible where we interview you and kind of curate it and pull it out of you, write it for you. But you still have to do the deep thinking. And
Oh yeah.
I will say it's still hard work. Like I heard Darren Hardy one time say, guess what? Building a business of any substance is freaking hard work. So,
Yeah.
so if you've tricked yourself as an entrepreneur, there's an easy button laying around somewhere. That's not the
Doesn't
case.
exist.
But if you're willing to put in the work and clarify the vision and now the path to get there, it really frees you up to where you're replicating yourself. And now you're able to step out of salesperson everyday role, which is where you were when you met us, to business owner, to CEO, where it's more the leadership, the vision of where the company is headed and empowering others to deliver on those promises. And it's one of the most addictive things that I see in my chair is I just love to see that unlocked from guys like you that deserve it and are willing to put in the hard work to do it. And
Yep.
it's really fun on my side.
It's got to be a joy. And I appreciate every bit of it too. And all the time that you guys pour into us, but it is like it doesn't, you just don't show up and it happens, and everybody's heard that and knows that. And that's the reason why they're even with Triad to begin with and listening to your podcast now, is they know it's not a walk in the park. But the thing for me that I think I just had to have somebody eventually one time tell me it's not impossible. Right. And that's the part where then what's the work you got to put in would be the next question, right? Which areas do you need to pour into next? And it has to be intentional. And then sometimes it's easier when you go in what we call the herd mentality, right? So that's why it's so important that the team is also bought in and you kind of explain away some of this process. Like, why are we doing this brand manifesto piece? Why are we spending time doing that when it doesn't seem like it's revenue generating whatsoever? Time in the day. And you have to go from that mindset of like reactionary, where it's like, I don't have time for that because I need to be in this appointment closing business, to thinking, okay, well, I need to spend this time here so that later on, I can make sure I have other advisors that are just stepping into these meetings, closing this business. So it's paramount that the time gets put in there. And this, all this has to be done intentionally.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I've heard psychologically, we just had Michael Hyatt out and he did a goal setting session out at Scale Summit. And he said psychologically, when you write something down, back to those champagne moments,
Mm-hmm.
back to the vision, it actually goes from just a thought, what can be a passing thought in the moment, to partial reality because it's now in the real world. It's out of your brain. It's on a written piece of paper. And the studies have shown just the act of writing it down, I think you're 40% more likely to accomplish it just if you get it out of your head on a piece of paper, which is pretty insane.
Dang. My
So,
dad growing up always actually said that. He said, "Hey, son, take your goals, write them on a note card." You know, that's something truly that I grew up with a father that was goal oriented. So
mm,
whether it was in sports or whether it was in business, and you know, he still touches base all the time, and we talk about literally we still talk about like what our goals are and how close are we to hitting our goals. So it's a reality though that if you write it out and then you work backwards, right? That's the great part, the planning part. And in our business, we can do that, right? Like we can actually set these goals, and we have great coaches where you can step backwards and say, okay, well, how do we get to that? What needs to change, or who on the team obviously needs to be here that's not here? Who is here that doesn't need to be here? And we can back into that thing. So our team that will go to the Bahamas this next year is like our team goal, right? Did they show up 100% because they're bought into the company, or is it because our company trips are pretty epic? I don't know, but
hey,
uh,
part of
they
doing
get a
business,
big
doing
goal of it.
life is have some fun rewards out there to go
Yeah,
chase.
right. So they,
How
and
many
especially
years
for
have you done that for a company trip?
now we're on our third year. Yeah, our third year doing it. And this last year we took everybody because believe it or not, you know, there's loads of people. Then I'm right here in the Carolinas, so it's like you'd think get to Orlando, be to Disney, Universal. Like
Yeah.
there are people on our team's never been before, right? So I'm like,
Wow.
well, hey, let's just do that. Super easy. Everybody was excited about it, so we went down, had a resort down there we stayed at, had a blast, took everybody out. Um, Pretty easy for everybody to get there. Cost was actually much more affordable than what I thought it would be. But then it's like you give them big win opportunities themselves along the year. But then when the team wins, everybody wins, and they need to be able to be bought into that vision.
I love that. Well, my man, I know, well, first off, we're counting down the hours to you being a dad, so I know our time
Yeah,
is limited.
tricky in about 24 hours. Believe it or
That is
not.
great. That's crazy. This is going to be a fun way to memorialize that. It's the last podcast you ever did as pre-dad. So
That's right.
I'm excited for you, man. You and Riley. And as we were saying before we went live, being a girl dad, I grew up
Pumped.
only brothers. My first two were boys, and having that little girl, it's a game changer, man. So I'm super excited for you.
Yeah, she says I need to be softened a bit more, so we'll see how that all works out. But we're excited about it, and thank you. Yeah, yeah, and you guys have been a great support, the whole team even. And I've had other people at Triad even reach out, you know, email Riley, send stuff to her on Instagram and et cetera. And so we appreciate that a ton.
Well, that's part of it, man. We're excited for you. All of that is 100% authentic. So, well, this is a good lead in to my last question for the day. I would love to hear Matt's definition of what does do business, do life mean to you?
Well, it just means where your life, your business is it's all the same, right? In reality, it's like where you go to work, you enjoy it, you go home, you enjoy it, and there's not there's it's easier said than done, but it's not a disconnect necessarily where it's like I don't have to sacrifice, you know, family time as much, or like I'd say, it's like the point where we get to where our family doesn't have to sacrifice as much, but then they also get to enjoy it when you make them a part of it, right? And so to me, it's where business and life don't really ever have a line that's drawn in the sand, that it runs together. And it's a part of why we're here on earth in reality, is to build something, you know, significant for other people. So as long as you, again, work on getting the family just as cultivated and just as entrenched, to me, it's like my family has to be bought into what we're doing here for people, right? And which is why Riley pops by the office all the time and spends time with my staff. So as much as I spend time getting my team involved, I want my family to realize like, hey, this is, you know, a part of life, right? It's
Yeah.
like these great people we work with and these great people we work for. So staying significant, right, is really truly what do business, do life means to me. And that's all about focusing on everybody else.
Well, when you build something bigger than you, where it's not about you, but about everyone, it's just cool how that changes the reality of what's possible. And it's been awesome to sit here and watch. And I appreciate, by the way, Matt, all of the kind words you've said about Triad and our team.
Which
But
you
the
didn't pay me
truth
to do,
is,
by the way.
what's that?
You didn't pay me to do that. So just
Well,
clarifying.
yeah, no, we didn't. But it's from the heart, man. And on our side, there's nothing more rewarding than to have humble students that are willing to work their butt off to build an incredible business that serves others. And that's what I love so much about this business is it's why I'm always like every day is exciting for me coming in here. And so that's you mentioned Jordan earlier. I just want to say that's one of the things I love about Jordan. He is so true to the mission that we're on here at Triad, building businesses of significance. He
Yeah.
he literally like if he sniffs a member that's a potential member that's like not about that, he's like,
For
man,
real.
great producer, but not a good fit, unfortunately. And so I just love how he's curated a community of just humble learners. And it's just really fun, man. So thanks for being a Triad member. It's been fun to
Absolutely,
do
man.
some business. And actually we've done probably a lot more live. So can't wait to do it with the new little
Yeah.
girl next time we see each other.
Oh, pumped for that. I don't know where we're going next. Where are we back out to? We out to,
Well, we're Palm Springs in January, if that's
that's
not
right.
too soon. Hey, we'll find a way. Like if we need to get a babysitter,
That's right.
but have you bring a nanny.
June next year, or what's the trip next year in the summer? Any ideas yet? Did you already announce that?
I do have an idea. Uh,
Maybe you
what the
haven't
heck? I'm
announced it
just you
yet.
ask. I'm going to tell you it's supposed to be in Hawaii. I don't know that it's all
Oh,
finalized yet, but
killer.
that's a good spot to go
Yeah,
with the new little one on the beach. So,
she will be there.
all right, brother. Well, I'll let you run. Good luck with
Yeah, man.
everything, and please, as soon as the new one arrives, please shoot us a text or whatever once things settle down.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate the time.
All right, brother. Till next one.
Yep. See you later.
On to this week's featured review. It comes from iTunes user JLAFOND23. They say relevant quickly, 5 stars. In a world with a lot of information available to sort through, this podcast provides information that is available to use immediately. That's, hey, I'll tell you, anymore in today's TikTok attention span economy, that's probably more important now than ever. So glad to hear that we're getting you the good stuff quickly. I do think some of the long form interviews, from my experience, sometimes you don't get to the good stuff till you kind of settle in 30, 45 minutes into a conversation. So I plan to continue with the long form content, the interview style. But also, I know the team works really tirelessly to pull little snippets and clips, share those out on YouTube. So for those of you that go out to YouTube, I believe it's under my personal Brad Johnson, Do Business, Do Life. If you search for that, should pop up our episodes. But I know the team does a great job of pulling little smaller clips, little 3 5 minute snippets to get you some of the ideas a little more bite size. And we'll continue to try to curate that as well. So with that, we'll try to keep the great conversations coming, but also get them relevant as quickly as possible, because I know everybody is busy and there's only so many hours in the day. So thanks again, JLAFOND23, for taking the time to leave the review. We'll see you.